So hello everybody, and a very warm welcome back to the second session of this year's Sub-Sahara Spectrum Management Conference. I hope that everybody in the break that we've had has had a chance to grab some lunch, and also maybe to use the networking area of the platform to either make some new contacts or to maybe meet up with some old friends. But I hope you're able to make use of that, and there'll be plenty of opportunity to do that again later on in the conference. But for now, we're going to move on to session 2. So for those of you who are with us for this morning's session, for the first session today, which was looking at identifying some of the key challenges for the regions, the key spectrum challenges for the region, and looking at how to make spectrum work for Africa, you'll have heard that one of the themes that kept coming up was that of rural connectivity and of tackling the digital divide. So it's fantastic to now have a panel which is going to be focusing specifically on that issue. So without further ado, I would like to welcome to the stage our moderator for the session, Bashir Gwandu. Bashir, are you there with us? I'm not sure if Bashir is there. Let me try again and see if we can get Bashir up to the stage. Okay, so Bashir, if you can, there we are. We can hear you now, Bashir. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Perfect. I think we can hear you now. We had a few issues there, but I think we can hear you now. So you can hear us okay, or hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you, Dan.
And I think we can hear you loud and clear as well, Bashir. So yeah, looking forward to the panel. So without further ado, I will pass over to you. Okay, so we seem to have lost Bashir again. So
let's start
to try and sort out the issues that we are having there, and we'll try and bring Bashir up. So what I'd like to do maybe is to turn maybe to some of our panelists, and actually I think Bashir might be back. We'll give one more try with Bashir. If not, then we will I'll move and introduce some of our panelists. Let's try again with Bashir.
I am back, I think.
You're back, yes.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry. This is part of the challenges we are trying to solve in this kind of conversation. Let me say welcome. Let me welcome all my colleagues to this year's forum, which is holding for Sub-Saharan Africa. Let me also use this opportunity to say Eid Mubarak to everyone who is celebrating Eid today across the continent, and indeed our colleagues from around the world. Okay, I'm gonna have to. Okay, can everyone hear me?
We can hear you, Bashir. It does keep breaking up a little bit, but we can hear you. I'll tell you what we're going to try and do is to try and sort out those connectivity issues that we're having with Bashir, and we'll try and bring him back up shortly. But as I'm sure Bashir was about to say, we have an excellent lineup of panelists here with us to discuss these issues, to talk about tackling global and regional digital divides. So I think the idea of this session is really to look at how to tackle digital divides both within Africa and also possibly some of the divides that lie between Africa and some other regions around the world. So looking at the different approaches that we have to tackle that. So what I'd like to do whilst we try and get Bashir back is to introduce our first panelists for the session. So the format for the session, each of our panelists are going to have some time to make a short introductory remarks. And then following that, we're going to have an interactive discussion and a debate to kind of cover some of the issues that have been raised in their introductory presentations. So we're delighted to have with us, first of all, to make our first intervention, Irene Kagwa Sewankambo, who's Acting Executive Director at UCC in Uganda. So Irene, welcome. It's fantastic to have you with us. And I'll pass over to you to give your opening remarks. So over to you.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what part of the globe you are. And Eid Mubarak to our brothers and sisters of the Islamic faith, and to the rest of us who are, of course, well-wishers. Now, on this subject of the digital divide, firstly, it's important for us to put into context. What do governments want, for example? All the governments right now want to make sure that ICT benefits are reaped by all. And now, even more, it's no longer just about the population, but everywhere, especially with the opportunities presented by the 4IR and all these other technologies. Market players, on the other hand, want market opportunities and to get revenue. They're in this for the money. And as regulators, we seek to create an enabling environment to facilitate these various objectives. Now, when we look at the areas that are not covered, because the digital divide typically looks at the people who have and the have-nots, and the have-nots include those who have little and those who have nothing at all. Now, in many of these areas, we see that there is a challenging landscape, either it's remote locations, possibly mountainous, with forest covers in some cases, or water bodies or arid vegetation. And this affects infrastructure deployment, especially when you look at medium like optical fiber. In many of these areas, we also have population distribution that is unlike the more vibrant areas. So you find homesteads that are typically dispersed in geographical location between each other. And then we also have cultural and social practices in some of these areas that make it a challenge to address. For example, the nomadic or the pastoralists who are continuously moving, and therefore, as you strive to give these people connectivity, those are issues you have to take into consideration. The economics is another issue that comes largely into play. The cost of deployment versus the revenue generated in these areas. Many of these areas have low purchase power in terms of the consumers. Affordability of terminals is an issue. We have situation in Uganda where some of the operators have put 4G coverage in areas, but there is no usage of those services because the people in those areas predominantly have 2G terminals and some not at all. Then the relevance and appreciation of these services, especially as we speak to broadband. For voice, we've gone past that stage where voice needed to be explained or marketed. But now with broadband, for some people, it's not as obvious or immediately relevant. Then we also have the exogenous factors that are not incumbent to our sectors. For example, the cost of electricity, cost of diesel, because the sites when you have microwave sites and all these base stations have to be kept powered up. Security for the sites, all these are issues that are not exactly within our sector, but they also contribute significantly to the economics of providing the services. So what have we done in Uganda in this respect? We've adopted a technology-neutral approach to facilitate harnessing of different technologies. So we are not prescribing a particular technology or discriminating against a technology. We're focusing on the outcome. What do we want to achieve? We also use the Universal Access and Service Fund to subsidize deployment of infrastructure to realize the desired coverage, as well as stimulate the demand side because of the economics that I have mentioned above. We look at issues like providing shared access facilities, ensuring we provide use cases for these services and applications that make the services more relevant to the respective communities, as well as facilitating the public digital literacy program. In the case of economics, I'm running a bit of fast because as Shiv commented, we have 7 minutes. So harmonization of spectrum is something that is very key. We might see it as minimal, but in terms of if we are to realize economies of scale, then harmonization of spectrum as well as standards for this other equipment is very important for the network equipment, but also the consumer devices to be able to get cheap devices. Encouraging infrastructure sharing. This extends to cross-sectoral infrastructure sharing. So looking at harnessing, for example, electricity poles and electricity pylons and all these other buildings that are under the public sector, but also looking at how we can encourage the industry to share spectrum, to set up joint networks especially for these new emerging technologies. We've also introduced the regional licensing, in which we seek to encourage persons who are only interested in particular areas. And these, again, we add an additional incentive by making sure that the license fees that are charged to persons operating in those areas are much lower than those for the more lucrative capital, the capital city, Kampala. And finally, I would say we are also doing studies into how do we bring the cost of the sites? Because one of the biggest costs that we have observed to the operators is the costs of leasing the sites from the tower companies. So how do we bring down this cost so that ultimately the cost of providing the services is lowered and also the cost to the consumer is lowered? I'll stop there for now in the interest of time, but happy to take some more questions. Thank you very much, Dan. Over to you.
And I'm afraid it is back to me because we haven't managed to get Bashir back. But Irene, thank you very much, and yeah, fascinating insight into some of the challenges and some of the approaches that you're taking in Uganda there to tackle those. So really interesting, and I'm sure there's lots there that we'll come back to shortly in the discussion part of the session. But for now, thank you very much. So having heard from Irene on the approach in Uganda, we're now going to turn to another country in the region, to Botswana, and we're going to hear the perspective from Bokra. And I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Luke Bathopi from Bokra, who is going to give us the overview of what the approach that is being taken there. So Luke, looking forward to hearing your thoughts on that, and yeah, as I said, the challenges that you see them and the approach that you're taking there in Botswana. So welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Dan, for this opportunity, and good day, everybody. And I'm very much conscious of the time that I have, and I'm just going to get straight into what I want to share with this distinguished panel. I think it's just my way of introduction. I mean, I am an engineer by training, and we engineers, we've been taught to solve problems with technology. And I like every other engineer, we fall into a trap of thinking that technology is the only thing that would solve this problem of digital divide. And unfortunately, where we are now, it is quite clear that it is not technology that is going to solve this. I know we are in a Spectrum conference, and obviously a lot of attention will be on Spectrum, but it is important that we bring all the other perspective into this issue. And I want to thank my colleague Irene for raising a lot of issues that I was going to raise, and that would obviously save my time. Can you go to slide 1 or slide 2 in this case? Yes, I think this was just to note the kind of divide that we see, at least in our region. I think we can agree these are the major 5: the divide of gender, divide of education, divide of earnings, whereby people who have is basically an issue of affordability. And then we also have divide of age, whereby we have solutions and services that are targeted to only a certain age, at an expense of another age, thereby disadvantage the other age group. And the major one, which I believe is very topical and is the main issue under this one, is the issue of location, where digital divide is created by the location of individuals. Next slide, please. I think when we talk about the digital divide, obviously we because it's one phenomenon like this. Like I said, we tend to think that it's one thing that can be solved by one solution. And I have talked about engineers thinking that technology is the only one that can solve this divide. Unfortunately, that has not been the case. And we have examples where we can talk about technology being deployed in a certain area, and we are not able to people are not able to use those services because there are many more factors over that. And I've picked up some issues that I believe this forum we all know. I just wanted to bring them to the fore. The issue of infrastructure development, that we see divide being caused because it's not feasible to deploy infrastructure, and this has been mentioned by my colleague. The issue of affordability divide being created by the fact that people are not able to afford these services and they are not able to afford the devices, and the issue of availability of services as well. I think the very fact that people don't see the need for a particular service, so they don't get connected because they don't see the need. And the last one is the literacy, which I believe we will talk more about. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yes. I think this is one of my myths, and that I thought I would bring forward, that, you know, despite these challenges that we have, there are realities that we can take advantage of. I think in most of our regions, we've had an advantage of mobile penetration, especially in terms of 2G. And a lot of governments, even including my government, we were able to subsidize the penetration of the mobile. And this is something that we can use to make sure we leapfrog as we bridge the digital divide, because we've got some certain infrastructure that is being deployed, and we know we can only build on that. And the other issue that I wanted to bring, that we have to see it as a benefit to us, is the fact that most of these communities, they are small communities, and you find that they've got shared interest or shared belief or shared culture. And in that case, you find that if you are able to tailor make some services, that will literally attract them to the services. And the other benefit that we can leverage on is the fact that we are getting the prices of devices are going down. We are seeing the cost of smartphones, especially from China, they are decreasing, and that makes it possible for to deal with issues of affordability and the issues of energy as well. A lot of these places that we talk about, they do not have a connection to the national grid for electricity, but we are finding a lot more solutions being brought about, the solar solutions, because sometimes you talk about energy, you only talk about the operator having energy to power their infrastructure. You forget about the user also needs to power their devices sustainably to be able to do so. And then the last issue, this issue of COVID-19. COVID-19 has really accelerated everybody, and because the fact that the economies of scales are increasing, the need is increasing, and there's much opportunity there. We are seeing people being connected. We are seeing cost of services going down, and this is the right opportunity for us to be able to get into full swing to bridge the divide. Next slide, please. Next slide. And then I'll just, this one was just to say we need to be able to deal with this thing. We need to get our priorities right. There are quite a lot of interventions we need to do, but we need to prioritize and make sure that we do small gains. Like one of the things that we think is very important and is common across all the government in the region is that we could start by government services. These are services that are needed by everybody, and they should be the drivers of closing the gap. I will not go through the other ones. It's just priority. I believe we will talk about even more as we discuss. Next slide, please. Then the next slide. Then just before I finish, I just wanted to get to what we have done in Botswana. I think our approach has been, we have subsidized the connectivity of, I've given you the timelines there, what we did from 2018. We've subsidized connectivity 3G and 2G then, and now we are doing 3G and 4G, and then the numbers of the villages keep increasing. And the other thing that we did is that because of the issues of literacy, where we put connectivity, we provide schools with internet connectivity, and then we provide IT officers who are able to train the students, and as well train even the people in the village who are interested in ICTs, to ensure that there's obviously usage and there's obviously people take advantage of this. And even beyond 2022, we will be expanding this thing to go into public places like our wards, our health facilities and schools, whereby the public can be able to access. The last slide, please. Yes, in conclusion, I think I've just put the thoughts that I was thinking, that, you know, digital divide is not a new problem. It has always been there, and then it's not only tied to a certain region, which means it is very important that we discuss in forums like this and see how we can best deal with these issues. But what we can acknowledge is that at this stage, the impact of digital divide is extreme, and it has no place really in this modern world that we are living in. If we want to build the world that every country dreams to build in terms of being connected, being economy driven, there's no way we can allow the status quo for digital divide to continue. And then the other point is that as countries, as government, we need to put deliberate efforts to make sure that we do this we bridge this divide. And one of the big things that we have to do is the issue of sacrifice. We need to sacrifice some of the issues in our budget. I know we have some other priorities like health, sometimes transportation and education, but we need to make deliberate sacrifices to ensure that we are able to bridge this divide. And the last but one point is that it is important that we make broadband a right. Wherever we make strategies, we make it the strategy from a departure point that broadband is a right to every citizen. I believe a lot of our countries have made strides in that. Even here in Botswana, we've made some strategies too, but we have not made it in legislation. Therefore, but I believe we are getting there. And the last point is that we believe, and I believe, with the interventions, with the collaborations that we are seeing, and with the acceleration of COVID, universal access, it is a reality. We should be able to get there. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much once again. Thank you. Can everybody hear me now? Good. Thank you very much once again. My sincere apologies for the disruption. It's just the nature of our network sometimes. Today being day of festivities, the calls are just too many, and the congestion is, I think there's some local congestion around me here, and my hotspot's also misbehaving. Anyway, now that I'm back in some form, may I now call on Shiv Bakshi, the Vice President, Industry Relations of Ericsson, to make his intervention for 7 minutes. Shiv, please.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
We can indeed, Shiv.
Fantastic. So for those of the faith, Eid Mubarak. May Allah's grace and benevolence always be upon you. And greetings from this side of the Atlantic. It's rather early here, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all my colleagues and friends. We'll talk about bridging the digital divide and rural connectivity. And we heard and saw both Irene and Luke lay out the issues so eloquently. So without further ado, if we can move to the next slide. Thank you. I wanted to sort of highlight the point that mobile seems to be the prevalent mode of connectivity, broadband connectivity, and it is the most widely deployed infrastructure. 91% of all mobile subscriptions will be for mobile broadband in 2026. That is according to the forecast in our Ericsson Mobility Report, just published in June. Currently, there are about 8 billion subscriptions, far exceeding the population of the world. And we are expecting about 8.8 billion by the end of the forecast period, which is the next 5 years. And there will be as many as 6.5 billion unique mobile subscribers by that time, according to our forecast. So the point is, this is the prevalent access technology for broadband worldwide. Next slide, please. So we are talking about the digital divide and providing rural connectivity. I just wanted to highlight something that both Irene and Luke have talked about, that connecting the unconnected at the economic and geographical margins is a moral imperative. We understand that. But what we don't understand is that often, we do understand, but sometimes when you listen to a lot of folks, it seems that digital divide is always conflated with rural connectivity or connecting those at the outskirts or the margins of society in geographical sense. I just wanted to highlight that it is also in economic sense. So the people, for instance, I come from India, so the people, and in the US we can't afford that kind of help, but in India we can. They come and wash your cars, they come and clean your house, and so on and so forth. These people live in the same geographical area as I do, but they don't have access to the technology, mostly because they don't find any relevance to whatever is being offered in digital services. There is a tremendous amount of digital illiteracy, and there is a lack of services in local vernacular. So those kinds of problems highlight the fact the challenge to bridging the digital divide is socioeconomic and socio-political, as Luke so eloquently pointed out in his presentation, and not merely technology oriented. There are, of course, if you think of the remote connectivity or rural connectivity, there are, of course, challenges to network deployment, lack of profitable business models, expensive supply, both in terms of civil works that are needed and services that can be generated to offer to those at the margin. So there is a serious challenge on the business model side also. Next slide, please. I wanted to sort of show this particular slide to highlight one thing. When you think of rural connectivity, tower and civil works, issues of power, issues of backhaul constitute a tremendous amount of that cost structure. The actual active network cost, the cost of radios, remains fairly stable across urban, rural, remote environments. And I want that out there so that when you hear, and you will hear me develop this idea in slides down this presentation. Next slide, please. So I kind of summed up the options for mobile broadband for rural connectivity. The key principle, as I pointed out, mobile is most prevalently deployed infrastructure. The idea would be to leverage that existing network infrastructure and assets when and where possible. And the three options of providing rural connectivity that seem to make sense given the prevalence of the infrastructure today and the widespread deployment of it is: one, upgrade existing 2G network sites to 3G and 4G, extend or densify the network through low-cost solutions where there is a gap, and then exploit the opportunity for fixed wireless access deployments to sort of reach people at the margins. One thing that Irene and Luke also highlighted, I want to sort of make sure that we have that in the back of our minds. Network connectivity is a necessary but not a sufficient condition for bridging the digital divide. Digital literacy, availability of services, affordability, services in vernacular languages, all these also constitute a problem and a barrier to utilization of these services. Moving on to the next slide. So I will not go through this in great detail, but I laid out here in some detail the elements of an effective mobile broadband rural coverage solution. The idea generally is the solution should be looking at costs and at sustainability. That should be the principal focus. And it should be, apart from low cost and easily deployable, it should also have the opportunity for backhaul built into the site, so that you don't need, as you upgrade, you don't need to sort of find alternative solutions for backhaul. Next slide, please. I lay out the three options in some detail. The point I want to highlight out here, that when you leverage the existing assets and upgrade the 2G radios to 3G and 4G, one thing that we have found is compared to 2G cell coverage, an upgrade to 3 and 4G radios on the same frequency band can provide a gain on coverage of up to 7 dB owing to better link budgets. That is, it will double the cell range. If you use 4G LTE with beamforming, it has the potential to double this extended cell range, essentially providing a 4-fold cell extension compared to the base case with 2G. And the good thing is that the passive infrastructure costs, sites, towers, electricity, which constitute a bulk of the cost, are already in place, right? Next slide, please. For rural MBB connectivity, the second option is where there are serious gaps and the villages or the rural areas are outside the 2G network reach at present. You can densify the network or extend the existing network, and this requires that the new sites and solutions meet the business model concerns rooted in their economic logic, the operators, I mean. And the central idea is to deploy a small cell in the unserved area with backhaul to a macro site, which I referred to earlier. The useful idea would be that it should be complementary to the operator's ongoing radio access network deployments. Next slide, please. And the third option, of course, is fixed wireless access. The general idea here is that the solution will require low investment and an upgraded 4G site in the network can serve a hotspot located 20 to 80 kilometers outside the 2G coverage range. In this scenario, you can connect a school or hospital or a major community center with a rooftop antenna, and this would give you 3 megabits downlink speed at a distance of about 100 kilometers from the 4G upgraded base station site. So there are solutions. Moving to the next slide. I want to sort of point out one more thing about the fixed wireless access is that over 70% of service providers globally now have a fixed wireless access offering. And service providers offering, the number of service providers offering fixed wireless access is increasing every day. 5G service providers are at the forefront of it, and almost 9 out of 10 have a fixed wireless access offering, whether in 4G or in 5G. And the high adoption rate of fixed wireless is also prevalent in countries with high fiber penetration. So it is replacing fiber in an important way owing to cost efficiencies and speed of deployment. And then there are some projections as to what fixed wireless numbers would look down the road. Moving to the next slide, please. This is one thing that I wanted to talk about, and I think Irene and Luke have referred to this. The challenge for the policymaker is how do we balance things when it comes to spectrum management, because spectrum, as you remember, is the lifeblood of all that is mobile. So there are the needs of the state, there are needs of society, and within the needs of society, you have to think about mobile, broadcasting, satellite, whether it should be licensed or license exempt. My friends in satellite will be very happy to hear that I am not going to sort of say that satellite does not provide tremendous value. It does. So does broadcasting. I trained as a journalist when I was young. So I have tremendous respect for broadcasting for that reason. And then there is mobile. The point, of course, is that if you have a resource, say I had $100 when I was a kid, I would want to spend everything on candy. At 25, I want to think about how best I can allocate my $100, right? So the policymaker has to think about where we are in the technology trajectory to make the right national choices. The different priorities and different technology trajectories of countries may dictate different choices, but I would argue that regional and global harmonization should always remain a key consideration. And the reason for that is the following. When I come to Africa, I'm told by my African colleagues with a lot of pride, hey, we are 1.3 billion people and we are a huge market. And I smile and I say, no, you're not. I come from India, we are 1.3 billion people and we are a huge market. Africa, unfortunately, is fragmented across 54 political regimes. Harmonization is the key to get the benefits of economies of scale, etc. And so that's very, very critical. I'll stop here and come back to making further points down the road. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chief, for this insightful intervention. I think there are so many comments that will come up on questions. Now, may I call on Peng Zhao to make his intervention? 7 minutes, Peng. Thank
you. Peng, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you, Bashir, as well for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Good day, and Eid Mubarak to all my Muslim friends. And thank you so much for Forum Global for providing this platform. Again, it's always a pleasure to participate in those debates. If I can have my first slide, please. So my name is Peng Zhao. I represent OneWeb. OneWeb, we are a satellite company, and our ambition is to provide a truly global communication network system from space, and that can deliver the low latency and high-speed internet service that everybody deserves. I think before I go any further into what exactly the kind of capabilities we can offer, I want to look at the challenge that's being set up for this panel, and that has been already discussed by the previous three speakers. Can I have a next slide, please? So I took a chart from ITU Facts and Figures that depicts the mobile network coverage, and I take that not as to poke or anyone or anything like that, but just like Shiv and the other speakers said, mobile technology has been one of the key kind of technologies that people have access to mobile broadband today and to internet. And you can see that in the last 10 years, there's loads of fast developments, and the 4G, 3G, and 4G coverage has increased a lot. And in developed countries, almost like 100%. In developing country, is catching up. However, when you look at the different countries in different kind of economic development stage, they will have a really different pictures. So you can see from that chart that the least developing countries and also the landlocked developing countries have 2G, 3G that is much less. That is lower than the average, and especially when it comes to 4G, the coverage is only half of what the rest of the world can be, and there's a good reason for that. Can we move to the next slide, please? And I think the good reason has been mentioned by Irene and by Luke and Shiv as well just before. And I think I'm using here the same kind of source as the Shiv from GSMA Intelligence about the economics of providing rural coverage. So I won't go too much on the chart on the right, because that's the same chart as Shiv already presented. But just give you an example on the left-hand side. So the left-hand side, what you see here is in fact one example country, UK. That show you how much it will cost to cover the population. So from the left, 0% to 100%, it's how they distribute the populations. And you can see that to cover the first 80% of the population, it is a kind of a linear kind of thing. So the more people you want to cover, the more base station you need to deploy. And you up till kind of 80% of coverage, you need maybe 10 billion in that case for the UK. But it becomes really the much steeper curve when it comes to the later, to the last 20%. So, for example, for the last 10%, if you want to cover the last 10% UK population, you need approximately 10 billion UK pounds. And so the same kind of amount of money as you would spend to cover the first 80% of the population. So you can see that it's a huge headache for mobile operators, just because of from the economic doesn't always work, and you will always concentrate on deploying in the city centers, etc. So that's to show that the challenge, why the rural coverage is always facing a bit more issues. Can we move to the next slide, please? And one of those issues is the backhaul. So coming back to what OneWeb and the satellite industry has to offer on that, but just on OneWeb itself, we are a satellite company. We are operating on the low Earth orbit, and we have been launching successfully 254 satellites into the orbit, and including 4 launches last 4 months. We have a the satellite has been built out of a factory in Florida, and we building 1 satellite per day, more or less. And we start deploying about 25 ground stations across the world. Next slide, please. And here is what we think we can bring as a change to the state of connectivity across the world. Is the first thing is that mobile backhaul using satellites is already existing, and you have a lot of usage today, in especially connecting 2G and maybe 3G sites. But the one thing we can offer, because we are more a low Earth orbit, is our latency is much more improved compared to more traditional. I think I saw some comment on that part about latency on the earlier session, but our latency is close to 50 milliseconds. So that can easily provide 4G connectivity and 4G backhauling solutions that can help you to provide VoLTE and also most of the gaming and even most of the 5G applications. But on the other end as well, we provide much cheaper supply sides, especially around the cheaper satellite manufacturing and also on the launch cost. So all we hope to disrupt the satellite communication market, but providing a much more a faster fiber-like speed to connection to everywhere. Next slide, please. And cellular backhauling is one of the things that we want to do, and so we want to help the MNOs to provide those rural connectivity that is not achievable today, and giving those 4G and 5G cell sites everywhere and providing a cheaper connectivity. But also in places where you don't have terrestrial networks, like on ships and aircraft, we can provide the 5G-like connectivity as well directly to those vehicles. And finally, just a quick word on the commercial service. Our service will be operational starting end of this year in northern part of the globe, and we will have a full global coverage by end of next year, Q4 2022, and with all the mobility a user terminals, so the one for aircraft and for ships, introduced in 2023. And my final slides, please. Just a word on the spectrum, because it's a spectrum conference today. What we use for our satellite connectivity is we use the Ka band on a feeder links between gateway and our satellites, and then we use the Ku band on our user terminals. So that's where we deploy the user terminals to the remote areas. That's on the Ku band. So those 2 bands are really critical for ourselves, but also for the remainder of the satellite industry. And I think we are here in a spectrum conference because everybody needs spectrum. Any wireless industry needs spectrum, and I think for the key thing for the for the regulator and policymaker is to think about, what do I really prioritize here? Do I prioritize faster speeds all the time for the people who already have access to 3G and 4G today, and getting them to 5G as quickly as possible, or getting the connectivity as inclusive as possible? And if the latter is the case, then I think combination of the different technology, including satellite, including terrestrial 4G and 5G. All those technology needed to be at the disposal of the regulator and policymaker to make the full connectivity reality. With that, I will stop my presentation. Thank you so much.
Bashir, are you there? You're on mute, I think, if you are. I'm not sure if Bashir can hear us. So let's see if we can get those. Oh, Bashir, there we are.
Tried to, hello.
Over to you, Bashir. Yeah, we can hear you. Over to you. Okay, it seems we're still having some issues with Bashir there. So Peng, thank you very much for that presentation, for giving that perspective from the satellite side of things. So yeah, no, really interesting, and I think it's great to have heard that, and obviously perspective from the other side, from Shiv on the mobile side, and of course from Irene and Luke from the regulatory perspective. So some really interesting questions raised. So let me bring all the panelists back up. I'm just going to bring Bashir up as well and see if yes, yeah, go on, we can hear you again. So back over to you.
Okay.
Bashir, can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yes, go for it.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. So it's unbelievable. I've been trying to use 3 different hotspots, none of them working on different networks. Can you believe it? I'm sorry about this. I just, during the course of conversation, I had to set another hotspot, so all of them not working. I'm sorry about this. Right. Thank you very much, Peng. I've actually heard you to the last statement you have made, and thank you for bringing to the fore the benefits of, low Earth orbit satellites, bringing down the latency to 15 milliseconds that will enable 4G. I think that's one key message I've captured from your presentation. By the way, this session obviously is about how do we use different technologies to complement each other in making sure that we provide connectivity across the population, in particular in an African continent, whereby the gaps are huge between the haves and the haves not, and the gap between Africa and the rest of the world to be addressed. Now, these are excellent sessions. I have had a lot of it, only that I have distractions along the way, but I have had using my phone most of the presentations. Now, I'm going to ask a few questions before the audience fire on their question, because there are questions coming through. So let me start by asking Irene. Let me start with the lady first. How can regulator ensure that all these complementary services coexist and work together in a harmonious way, and that we as industry promote the complementary nature of the services to make sure that the unconnected are connected? Irene.
Thank you, Bashir, for that very key question. Of course, as a regulator, you are the one to make sure everybody is able to come. The way you design the door determines who can go through the door. But very many times, a key aspect that informs that, beyond the technology neutrality that I talked about, in terms of approach, in terms of licensing, in terms of planning, even in terms of the policy aspects, it is very important to have the information, the right information with you. And therefore, for example, Shiv is a person who very often you'll find us seated on the side of a meeting, speaking very openly in terms of the challenges. Peng is a long-term friend who we have spoken about different aspects. So getting that information so that you are making decisions based on the right information is very key. You lose nothing by seeking consultation, seeking opinion and making sure that at the end of the day, as you do your planning, as you do your designing of policy, of regulation, you have that rounded information, you have the understanding. For example, you referred to what Peng was talking about, and having an appreciation of what satellite is today vis-a-vis what satellite was. She did a very good job of giving that insight of understanding what are the aspects in terms of the towers, in terms of what are the options. Today we have networks that are a combination of different technologies. And unless you have that understanding, you are likely then to box out or box yourself into planning based on only a limited set of options available. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, standards are very key, because yes, we are encouraging innovation, but at the end of the day, there are some compromises that are a bit expensive to you as a country and also to the people you serve. I could go on and on, but I think I'll stop there for now.
Thank you very much, Irene. Now I'll go to Luke. Luke, there's one of the questions from the audience says, it is accepted that satellite can bridge the urban and rural gap, especially in bigger countries. Can a monitoring station that mimic some aspects of satellite network operation center, especially the traffic protocols and others, a number of subscribe, be installed in regulators' office for monitoring purposes only? This is a question from Rodin. Rodin is well known to us. He's from Ghana, Gambian regulator. What's your take on that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Bashir, or Dr. Bashir, sorry, and thank you for the question. I think as a regulator, obviously, you have an immense responsibility to ensure that everybody is working within the parameters that you have defined. Otherwise, nothing is going to work. And it is important that every technology that is being implemented, the regulator has to have an appreciation of how things are working there. The regulator has to make sure that things are working well and people are not to operate in the spectrum that is not licensed and stuff like that. So it is important that the regulator should have tools to monitor. I think I was trying to go to the specific. Oh, okay, yeah. Now I can see it. I can see it now. That can we have is it? It disappeared again. I was looking at the. I wanted to understand the specificity of this question in terms of what mimics the. Yeah.
I think the issue Orion probably is trying to make here is, can the regulator really, is it a good idea, if I may use that word, for a regulator to put a monitoring device to monitor traffic of satellite in their office? Well, I think, if I may help here, I think, regulators can monitor, but to go in the deep end of anything that will enable regulator to do is function. I think it should be a welcome idea. But would it be a good idea for regulator to indulge in this as against, for example, light touch regulation, where you give directions and make sure that there is compliance to the particular set of directions by the operating companies? Probably this is a middle ground, rather than going in to put a station right in the regulator's office to monitor traffic. I mean, should that be the functions of a regulator, or should that be the way a regulator should operate, rather than at an arm's length dealing and making sure that's light touch so that rules are followed? What is your? I think that's probably the point.
Yes. Now it's quite clear, and I think you've captured most of it. The regulator really works there to enable the market to function. The regulator is not a forensic investigator, and it would be wrong. I think there are other agencies set in government that have to go inside monitoring the traffic, how it is. The regulator should be able to set frameworks that operators should operate in, and also enable them to innovate. Where there are abuse, I believe every country there are systems and there are agencies that are set up to do so. The regulator should just ensure that people operate within the general parameters. And as you've put it up, the arm's length kind of regulation, whereby you allow the market to grow, but obviously keeping an eye to ensure that the national objectives are met without drifting away from that. So yeah, I definitely agree. Thank you.
Then the next, thank you very much, Luke. My next question is to Shiv. Shiv, they said interesting assessment around your slides 6 and 7, which in fact the total cost of ownership is. Then the question is there not a break point in terms of number of repeaters and location of repeaters where the cost of operations, that's operational expenditure, and investment means that a terrestrial backhaul solution will not result in lower investment? What's your take on that?
Thank you. Thank you, Bashir, for the question. Is it possible to put up slide 6?
Yes, of course. I mean, I think we can be helpful with that.
But
yes, go ahead.
let me address this to begin with. I do not know the breaking point in terms of how many repeaters make it a little bit more expensive than getting, say, satellite connectivity, right? But let me be very clear. There are situations where the satellite connectivity might be the best viable option for backhaul connectivity for mobile networks. However, you have to understand this in perspective. There is the issue of latency, there is the issue of cost, and there is the issue of future-proofing the deployments that you have. The general idea is to use microwave backhaul for line-of-sight solutions and fixed wireless and relays for non-line-of-sight solutions when it comes to backhaul. And the reason for that, amongst others, is A, the network operator is always going to try to sweat his or her own assets, something that he or she controls. And number 2 is that satellite connection is best avoided for high costs, both present and future. The beauty of using microwave for backhaul is that it can be used to upgrade the site. Should you upgrade the site to a permanent site, a permanent macro site, then your backhaul will always be in place. Now, that said, I have to sort of admit to one thing. I do not know the break point. But the general principle of trying to build an effective rural coverage solution is going to be based on both cost and sustainability of the solution. And for low cost, we have recommended, the industry and Ericsson in particular, that we should put in self-support or guide pole towers, which could be part of the solution, which are concrete free, really easy to reinstall in other sites should the pattern of information consumption shift. So for those reasons, it seems that your future proofing of the site for potential macro site tomorrow, for cost reasons, the microwave is a better option in most situations. As of today, my best understanding talking to our operator friends is that satellite constitutes about 4% of the mobile backhaul worldwide. Now, the number may be a little higher in one region, a little lower in another, but on average, it's about 4% and decreasing. So just wanted to sort of share that with you.
Thank you, Shiv. Now, whilst you are still answering questions on that, now, can I ask, what is your take on the question that was going at the earlier session about harmonization? How important, range 1 to 5, is harmonization in your view, and what are your reasons for your view?
Bashir, you know my answer to that, and I always joke, and I mentioned that in my presentation. Africa is 54 countries. Africa is divided in 54 regimes. So having 1.3 billion people does not constitute a market in the same sense that India having 1.3 billion people constitutes a market under single regulatory and policy regime. So if you don't harmonize the spectrum, you will not be able to tap in the global economies of scale. You will not be able to deal with interoperability. You will not be able to sort of leverage the cost, the decreasing cost of network devices and services that can be deployed on those. So harmonization is the key for current and future spectrum management.
So your number is what?
Number one.
No, number one is the lowest. 5 is the highest. So your number is 1.
No. 5. I thought number 1.
Okay, thank you.
Just as I think of you as the number 1 person in. No.
Okay, great. Anyway, that said, actually, that is the whole idea of our discussions across Africa and the ITU is to make sure we standardize, we harmonize, whether it's standard or whether it's spectrum, so that the benefits of that cooperation can trickle down in terms of lowering of the cost of devices. I think that is given thing. Now there are a couple of questions for Peng, or rather a couple of points. I think Ms. Peter wants you to begin opportunity to take on a point made by Shiv, which says you saw Ericsson slide saying satellite connectivity should be avoided for higher cost. Make a comment on that. That is for present and future. And then, and on top of that, what is the difference between OneWeb solution and the Starlink solution? Please do use cases. I think that question is from Zoran. Can you comment to that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. I think really interesting. I will take the second question first. I think that's slightly more straightforward. Basically, the key difference between Starlink and SpaceX and ourselves is that SpaceX is planning to have a direct connection to the consumer, whereas from our side as OneWeb, we are mainly providing and we are only providing B2B solutions. So basically wholesaling. Our main customer are the mobile operators, and as I said before, is to provide this rural connectivity and backhauling to those rural sites. So that gives me a good segue back to the question that Peter raised, and I think Shiv also commented already, is the cost and the kind of the solution that we provide. I think there are kind of really a lot of developments nowadays in the satellite industry. I mean, I joined the satellite industry really shortly, not a long time ago, but I can see that there's a lot of new developments, especially on the term of kind of a high throughput satellites done by several of our friends in the geostationary satellite, but also the innovation that is bring up by us in the LEO constellations. And it's not only on the latency, as I said, it's also on the cost. And as I mentioned before, we are on the LEO, at least we can have one satellite. We're manufacturing one satellite per day. We're launching 30 or 40 satellites per month into the sky. And that lower a lot the kind of the launch cost, the manufacturing cost, and it's also about economy of scale, right? But at the end of the day, when we come back to what kind of solution each country has to deploy, or especially which MNO should use what kind of a backhauling solution, I think I much prefer Irene's approach, which is technology neutrality. I mean, let the economics speak for itself. I mean, we, at least at OneWeb, we don't consider ourselves as a kind of a competition with terrestrial 5G network, but we consider ourselves as a competitor with a fiber rollouts, and not really a direct competitor, because we want to provide this fiber connectivity to places where fiber is not feasible. So there's no real, we have a good kind of place to say, if you compare to fiber cost, you need $10,000 per kilometer of rollout of fiber. And without fiber rollout, you don't have 4G or 5G base station.
Okay, we have just 10 minutes to go, and I wanted to ask, I mean, whether anybody see different before I go into going around for final comments, whether any of the panelists see, I mean, see that the complementary nature of the services and how do we improve on the complementation from basically different technologies, satellite, mobile, fixed, and so on. I mean, should there be, if you like, a lot of competition for spectrum, all that should all services see it as part of their remit to encourage other services to grow, so that we all complement each other across board, so that the benefit can go to citizens, whether in the cities or in the rural areas. Now, this I just want 10 seconds or have 15 seconds comment. Who wants to take? I don't see show of hands from the panelists.
Can I go?
Chief, go first.
Thank you. I would like to sort of add to what Peng was saying, because the question was picking one line. At no point am I suggesting that we should not have a cooperative thought process trying to provide the best solution and the best services to people in any society. In certain conditions, of course, you would need satellite connectivity because of conditions that Irene described, where it would be not feasible to sort of provide non-line of sight, because of non-line of sight reasons, microwave backhaul. Now, with reference to the cost, we can only make decision on the basis of what we have seen. Tomorrow, from Peng's mouth to God's ears, there might be much better economic value in using OneWeb. I'm sure operators will consider that. So it is not like we are ruling out everything forever and ever. Technology's improvements are always to be exploited for efficiency, for cost, and so on and so forth. Getting to your point, what was your point? I forgot.
My point is the cooperation that should exist between different technology providers to ensure that all services complement each other in making sure that the services get to both urban and rural areas. So, I mean, I think you have taken that already.
One line statement that clarifies in my mind: under COVID conditions, I've been doing a little bit of cooking. And what I realize is that in my repertoire of knives that I need and slicing devices that I need, there are a whole bunch of them. And they all have to sort of get me to the point where I can actually be efficient in whatever I'm trying to slice and dice. So similarly, when you're trying to provide services, the society should have in its repertoire all kinds of access and backhaul technologies available to it, and should prioritize, of course, those which are more efficient or more widely deployed and have infrastructure that can be leveraged. So that was the point.
Thank you, Chief. May I go to Irene to make a final intervention before I go to Luke? I'm going to go around maybe 1-2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I think my final statement would really be in respect of completeness in terms of consideration. We tend to end up fixing ourselves to just the technical part, and in this case of serving the unconnected or the underserved, it is important that we look holistically at also the other socio-economic issues to make sure that whatever solutions are provided are sustainable. I always argue, why do you say these people should, for example, only get speeds? They should get a best effort that this is that much. But if we're saying, for example, you want to bring remote health or telemedicine to these persons who are in these areas, then they are going to need good speeds. So we need to have that holistic and rounded approach as we look at solutions for this, recognizing that there will be no magic bullet.
Thank you, Irene. And Luke, one minute. Apparently, we have just 5 minutes now, so one minute. I'm going to reduce the time as we go along.
Okay, thank you very much, Bashir. I think one of the things that I wanted to throw in is that, you see, when you consider this rural connectivity, there's not much scarcity of spectrum, and that has to be. We have to bring it that is not where we are struggling. We are struggling across the other element that bring the divide, and then we've discussed about tech neutrality, where we were giving the operators technology neutral licenses to allow them to refarm spectrum as technology changes. Now, that is good, but then the challenges comes when we are getting a new innovative operators. How do they access that spectrum now that the legacy operators are getting hold of and are able to do things at their pace? I think my point there is that we need the issue of harmonization, and we need to be collective and be able to accommodate these new services that are coming up. Sometimes we are a bit not too adaptive when technology comes, but it is important that as a regulator we are able to accommodate these upcoming technologies, and we are able to see how we can get them to benefit from the spectrum that is being held by the legacy operators that sometimes are profitable and are comfortable where they are, and they are a bit reluctant to change.
And now I'll let you go. I have one question for you there that just sprang up, which says, what can be done by the regulators of Africa to ensure or facilitate the integration of solutions such as the OneWeb, the solution offered by OneWeb, and of course the terrestrial services, to ensure that is basically harmonious work. But how do you ensure the integration of the two services, the OneWeb and the terrestrial?
Yeah, as you know, the technology will sell itself. It is good, especially in terms of cost. But as a regulator, we need to engage. Especially, we talk about spectrum. We talk about coexistence of services. We talk about sharing of spectrum. This is what we should ensure, that when a technology comes, we use our expertise to ensure that it's able to operate and give value with the services. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Now, before I go to Peng for closing statement, there is a showcase. I think I don't know whether she wants to say one few seconds, because you have literally one minute. So say something about your showcase, then Peng will finalize. So I go around in that cycle.
Fantastic. Before I get to that, one small statement. There is a very nice set of recommendations that ATU has developed for spectrum for regulators and policymakers in Africa that one should seriously take a look at. They have been deliberated upon quite extensively, and then they have come to those recommendations. So shout out to ATU's work for everybody. Now, with reference to the showcase, I'm very happy to talk about that. We are going to be talking about dedicated networks for Industry 4.0 opportunities, and the role of 5G and licensed spectrum for local industries.
And that will come up immediately after this session.
It is immediately after. The central idea behind that is, in one sentence, that if Africa is going to exploit the growing opportunities as the production, distribution, consumption value chains are being reconstituted, one should think about Industry 4.0 options, and we are going to discuss that.
Thank you, Sheep. Now, Peng, I think, Luke, I don't know whether you have any second, but Peng, you have a few seconds before we close.
Oh, thank you so much, Bashir. I think, just as close, I think I believe regulators today have a really tough job. This evolving kind of technology landscape. 4G, terrestrial, 5G is evolving at a really fast pace, but also on the satellite industry side. I think all those information, wherever you require them, we can provide as an industry, and I'm sure Shiv agreed to that as well. But the only thing I would say is that there's no one technology that can solve everything. 5G can for sure push the digital economy further, but you need to have the kind of inclusive and the thing about the people who don't even have 2G or 3G today. So we are here, all the industry are here to support the work from the regulators, and especially on spectrum area, we can definitely provide any support you need. Thank you.
Thank you, Peng. Thank you, Peng. Luke, is that burning thing, or can I go ahead to close? If it's burning, go ahead for a few seconds. I'll just borrow few seconds from Dan.
Yes. Oh, thank you. I was just saying we need solutions that will drive down cost, and that's basically what we need to close this gap.
Thank you, Luke. And by saying that, it means we need to talk together. We need to harmonize. We need to work together to make spectrum available for different services. We need to have right policies that will encourage that harmonization. We need to have infrastructure. We also need to have good policies that will encourage deployment of services to both urban and rural areas. With that, I thank every one of you for very good intervention. Now hand over to Dan for next for what to do next. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bashir.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Bashir, and thank you very much to all of our panelists for another fascinating session. And Bashir, I'm glad that you managed to get around the challenges with your connection in the end. So it's nice and clear now, anyway. So, but thank you all very much. A fascinating session. So I really do appreciate that. Thank you all.
Thank you.
So as Bashir mentioned, and as Shiv mentioned as well, we're now moving on to our showcase sessions. So Shiv gave a little overview of one of the showcase sessions that is going to be happening. And hopefully, if I can get the system to work, the slides for some reason aren't coming up here. So I will just talk you through the two showcases that we have. So Shiv mentioned the Ericsson showcase that we have is going to be looking at 5G spectrum and local industry networks. And that one is starting now straight away on showcase stage 1. And alongside that, we also have a second showcase session running, which is being hosted by Microsoft and DSA. And that is looking at the importance of socioeconomic value of Wi-Fi 6E and Wi-Fi 7 for Africa. And that is happening now on showcase stage 2. So those are going to be starting immediately. I think Peng is actually going to be making his way as well over to the OneWeb exhibition stand. So I know there are a few comments and questions that some of you had for Peng in the chat. He's actually kindly agreed to go and make his way over to the OneWeb exhibition stand now. So he'll be doing that. So there's also the option, if you wanted to raise any further questions or to talk about OneWeb with Peng, he will be at the exhibition stand very shortly as well. So please do make your way over to the showcase sessions. Those are going to be starting in just a minute or so. Once again, a massive thank you to all of our panelists and to Bashir for another fascinating session there. And as I said, we look forward to seeing you at the showcases shortly. And then we're back here on the main stage at, I will just check the time. We're back here at somewhere here. It tells me what time it is. At 4:30, sorry, 4:30 today. We are back here for our last session, which is going to be looking at backhaul. So 4:30 Central African time. Thank you all so much and enjoy the showcases.